Good evening. I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and welcome to my weekly internet show. You know, one of the most popular refrains or bromides in our day and time is the one that says, the troops are defending our freedoms. You know, they're referring, of course, to the troops in Afghanistan and it used to be in Iraq and, Yemen, wherever else they are. They've got bases totaling about 1,000 in some 130 countries, and the idea is that the troops are defending our freedoms. I mean, we hear this all the time, right? We hear it at sports events. You go to a baseball game and you're going to hear, oh my gosh, we want to thank the troops. They're defending our freedoms. You go to a concert and then the singers will sit there and do a paean to the troops because they're defending our freedoms. And you see it in the public schools, you see it in the private schools, you hear it on the airwaves, you see it on television, and everybody repeats it, or most everybody, but no one who's saying this bromide ever stops to think about how it is that the troops are defending our freedoms, right? I mean, nobody ever asks that question. Nobody ever says, hey, you who just said the troops are defending our freedoms, would you explain to me how it is that the troops really are defending our freedoms? And if you were to do that, I'm absolutely convinced that the person that's saying the bromide would not be able to answer you because he hasn't given it any thought. He's just sort of repeating what he hears everybody saying, and he knows this is what he's expected to say as a citizen. I mean, this is considered the mark of a good citizen, a citizen that says the troops are defending our freedoms. And so you just see everybody repeating the same thing, and yet nobody asks how it is that they're exactly doing that. It's sort of like that old story of the emperor's new clothes, where the emperor is going around naked, but everybody's saying, oh, look at his new suit, oh my gosh, it's beautiful, look at that. And so everybody convinces himself that the emperor's got this new suit of clothes on because, everybody else is saying it. He doesn't want to stick out, and so he convinces himself that the emperor is walking around this beautiful suit of clothing, and then all of a sudden this kid pops up and says, wait a minute, the emperor's naked. He doesn't have anything on. And everybody's like, what? He's shocked. Oh my gosh, where does this kid think my gosh, what's he doing, confronting us with reality? Well, kid is probably a libertarian, because that's what we libertarians do. We take all these little bromides and these mindless, inane, ridiculous things that are repeated over and over again, and like the government is here to take care of me, and the government watches over me, all those same little bromides, and we confront people with reality. And so, we ask people, how is it that the troops are defending our freedoms? Okay, well, they'll say, well, they're killing terrorists. They're killing terrorists. Okay, so let me see. So the idea is that the terrorists are going to take away my freedom? I mean, is that the idea? I mean, think about this. I mean, because, we got to break this thing down to realize how ridiculous it is. Okay, how many terrorists are there out there? Okay, well, we don't know the exact number, but, I mean, I'm talking about anti-American terrorists, because obviously there's terrorists everywhere, I mean, like in Egypt, there's people that try to violently oust the military dictatorship in Egypt. The regime says they're terrorists. Okay, so you've got all these terrorists that want to violently overthrow this dictatorial regime. The U.S. government considers them terrorists too, because if it's a pro-U.S. military dictatorship, as is the Egyptian dictatorship, if an Egyptian citizen tries to oust that regime through violence, he's considered a terrorist. Now, of course, you go to Syria, and people that are trying to oust that dictatorship, well, the Syrian regime calls them terrorists. I mean, there's no question in the mind of Assad and the Syrian government that these people that are trying to oust the government are terrorists. But the U.S. government and the people trying to oust the dictatorship, they consider themselves freedom fighters. And the reason the U.S. considers them freedom fighters, unlike like people in Egypt or Bahrain. Bahrain's another example where there's a brutal dictatorship, but people that are trying to oust that regime are considered terrorists by the U.S. government, the Bahrain government, because those are pro-U.S. dictatorships. In Syria, it's an anti-U.S. dictatorship or a dictatorship independent of the U.S. empire. It's not part of the realm. And so, the U.S. considers the people there to be freedom fighters that are trying to oust the regime. So there's terrorists everywhere, you see, but how many terrorists are really, trying to enslave the American people? I mean, because that's what we're really talking about as far as our freedom's concerned, right? That somebody's going to take over the government and enslave us. They're going to turn us into slaves, where we have to serve our masters. Sort of like slavery in the Old South. We're going to lose our freedom to the terrorists who are going to take over the government. Okay? That's got to be the scenario here, so that when they're killing the terrorists over there, it's because they would be coming over here to take over the government. Well, this is ridiculous. I mean, for one thing, just because the troops are over there doesn't mean that the terrorists have to fight them over there, right? I mean, if they want to take over our government, why fight the troops over there? Why not just come over here? Especially when the troops are over there and unable to defend America. I mean, wouldn't it be smarter if the terrorists want to enslave us, they want to take away our freedom, to just come straight to the United States? I mean, it's not like the troops in Afghanistan are like this magnet, and the terrorists are iron filings where they they don't have a choice. Oh my gosh, I gotta fight the troops over here in Afghanistan when I want to go to America to enslave the American people by taking over their government. No, it's not like that. These are human beings. They have a choice. So if the troops are in Afghanistan and the terrorists want to come and take over our government in order to enslave us, deprive us of our freedom, well, the terrorists can just come straight over. Now, how many do we think there are? Well, let's say, 5,000? 5,000 terrorists. Oh, let's double the number. Okay, double the number. 10,000 terrorists that want to take over America. They want to take over the government. Now, obviously, that's ridiculous, okay? But let's just play along. Let's say there's 10,000 terrorists that are coming to the United States to take over the government. All right, so they get on, 3 cruise ships or something, and they cross the Atlantic, and let's say they land at Virginia Beach, okay? And so they get off there, the 10,000, and now they've got to make their way across America in order to conquer the country. You see, because in order to enslave the people and deprive us of our freedom, you've got to conquer the country. So let's say you've got, out of this 10,000, 3,000, head to Texas, and 3,000 head out west, and 3,000 head north up to New York City and Washington. Well, do you see a problem already? I mean, like 3,000 people is not that many people. I mean, let's say they're marching up I-95, these 3,000 terrorists. Or let's say they commandeer some cars and stuff. I mean, it seems to me like that's like a no-brainer, being able to, knock out 3,000 people. I mean, you could just take the guys that have guns and barricade the roads. And what would those 3,000 guys do? I mean, how are they going to withstand, airplane attacks from the Army, missile attacks, private militia, guys that have guns? I mean, are you getting a sense of how ridiculous this scenario is, that they are protecting our freedoms over there by killing the terrorists that want to come over here and take over the government? They want to take over the IRS and the public schools. I mean, you really think that 10,000 terrorists could run the public schools, run the IRS? I mean, what are they going to do? Conscript Americans to work for them in the government? It's ridiculous. It is the most ludicrous thing. I mean, look, it was bad enough when during the Cold War when they said, oh, the communists are coming, the communists are coming, the dominoes are going to fall. We have to sacrifice 60,000 American men in Vietnam because otherwise the dominoes are going to start falling. And then we got to intervene in Guatemala and Nicaragua, and we got to have a coup in Chile, and because all these communists are coming over. Oh, there's Fidel Castro, even though he's never attacked the United States, we need to assassinate him. And hello, I mean, even then that was ridiculous. But what's really ridiculous, at least the Soviet Union had nuclear weapons, right, big armies and stuff. But I mean, how do they cross the ocean and so forth? But okay, but let's say you think, okay, well, the communists were really a genuine threat, Jacob. The communists really were. They were going to take over America. Well, the terrorists don't have an army. They don't have ships. They don't have aircraft carriers. They don't have airplanes. They don't have big weaponry to conquer a country. In other words, there is no danger whatsoever of America coming under an invasion. Even today, the nation states that have giant armies, Russia, China, they're not able to invade and conquer the United States. They don't have the military means to do that. I mean, it boggles the mind to comprehend what it takes to invade a country. I mean, you're talking about millions of troops crossing the oceans, with everybody getting prepared over here because you can't keep something like that secret. I mean, China, it can't even enforce its air the seas around China. I mean, sure, they have a great big land army, but what good's that going to do? They got to cross that army across the ocean. They don't have the military means to do that. And yet, here's everybody scared to death of, quote, terrorists. I mean, the terrorists have no army. There's no aircraft carriers, ships, guns, planes, and whatever. So if they're able to get some cruise ships to make it on over here, what do they do then? I mean, they'd be smashed within, 6 hours, 3 hours? What I'm trying to say is that this is an inane bromide, that the troops are over there protecting our freedoms, because our freedoms are not under threat. Not from these so-called terrorists. Now, the thing about it is that, when they're over there, when the troops are in Iraq and Afghanistan or in these military bases overseas, that sure, there's people resisting them, but that's not people that are trying to come over here to America to take away our freedom. Those are people that are saying, get out of my country. In other words, like I said earlier, if they were coming to take away our freedoms, they wouldn't be fighting the troops over there. They'd say, hey, America sent its troops over here, and we want to take away their freedoms, so we'll just circumvent the troops and come all over the United States. No. Instead, they fight the troops over there. Remember, they're not iron filings. This isn't a magnet. And they want to get rid of the empire. They don't like the domination. They don't like the projection of force, the good peacekeeping missions, the foreign aid to dictatorships. They don't like the empire. They don't like troops in their lands. They don't like the occupations of their countries. They don't like the invasions of their countries. And so they end up retaliating. Now you can say, oh, well, Jacob, what about 9/11? 9/11, people always think, oh, well, history begins with 9/11. Well, that was nothing more than the same thing, a retaliation. They weren't over here trying to take over the government. They weren't trying to take over the IRS. They didn't have an IRS commissioner appointed. They didn't, think about, oh, well, who's going to be the head of the Department of Education, and who can we get as an American to be our stool pigeon to be liaison to the Americans. Ridiculous. They were retaliating for what the empire had done overseas. I mean, you got the sanctions against Iraq that killed, hundreds of thousands of Iraqi children. They had the support of Saddam Hussein. They had support of other dictatorships in the Middle East. The unconditional support of the Israeli regime. The stationing of troops on Islamic holy lands. In other words, the imperial presence is what caused all that anger and resentment, and it's still doing it. I mean, it's still doing it in Afghanistan. All the people they're killing, and for every person they kill, it generates 10 angry people. And they're doing it now with the assassinations. You know, they're going out and assassinating people. No trial, no due process, nothing. They sit there and consult with the president over coffee and decide who's going to be assassinated this week. And they call that due process. They say, well, as long as we consult over who should be assassinated, no problem. And forget the Constitution. I mean, it doesn't provide any power to assassinate. In fact, it specifically says no person, not just citizens, no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And everybody knows that due process, except the Obama administration, knows that due process of law means judicial review, going to the other branch of government. All right, so that's what it's all about here. The troops are not there to defend our freedoms. They're there to defend the prerogative of the national security state to maintain its presence around the world. And here we're talking about the Middle East. The empire is saying, we have a right to be in the Middle East. We are an empire. We can maintain our bases wherever we want, Islamic holy lands. We can sanction whoever we want. We can embargo Iran, Cuba, whatever, because we are the empire. We are the world's sole remaining empire. The Soviet Empire is dismantled. The British Empire is gone. This is the American empire. We are projecting force. We are a force for good. All right. That's what the troops are doing. They're defending the prerogative of the empire to maintain its presence around the world. Right now, the military is saying, well, now that we have to get out of Afghanistan in a couple of years, we've already gotten out of Iraq. Looks like people are tired of our presence in the Middle East, and so we need to reorient. And so now they're reorienting toward, Asia, China. They're trying to get military bases of all places. Vietnam, you can believe that. They're over there making friendly with this communist regime. Remember the communists that were supposed to come and take us over and conquer us? They're making good with the communists. I mean, what they're doing is really proving that this is what could have gone on during the entire Cold War. That there can be mutual existence with communist regimes. That there didn't have to be a big Cold War. Didn't have to be, this ever-growing military-industrial complex and the CIA and the whole national security syndrome and so forth. I mean, they're proving that by going out and sending warships to make friends. I mean, that's how they make friends. The national security state does, not through the private sector. They keep us from making friends with their embargoes and sanctions. They go make friends by sending warships over. I mean, it's bizarre. Okay, so then why do so many Americans buy into this? I mean, when you break it down and you analyze it and you say, gosh, Jacob's right. The terrorists, they're not coming over here to enslave us. They're not going to take over the government. And the troops are over there defending the right of the empire to maintain its presence. So why do so many people buy into this thing? You see businessmen, right? I mean, it's not just children. I mean, that are inculcated with this notion in public schooling. I mean, that's where it starts. I mean, that's the whole purpose of state schooling, the indoctrination factor. That from the first grade, the troops are over there defending our freedoms. That's the purpose of the troops, to defend our freedoms. See, they have to convince people from the very first grade that this national security state is a permanent feature in American life. They have to teach them that this is essential to your freedom. Because that way, then, the whole national security state becomes permanent. It's no different like in Egypt. Right now, they got a military dictatorship there. But the military is saying, we're not going anywhere. We're permanent because you need us to be a free society. You need us for national security, and we're not going anywhere. Well, it's pretty much the same situation here. Now, of course, you've got democratically elected officials and so forth, but the mindset of the military is that they are essential to our freedom. That all that projection of force overseas, all those military bases, that those are all essential to our freedom. That if we didn't have this warfare state, that Americans would no longer be free. And they inculcate that notion into the mind of children, so that by the time they graduate from high school, they go through college, they receive the same thing. Private schools too. I mean, private licensed schools, same kind of concept, that troops defend our freedoms, And so by the time a person becomes an adult, it's like, oh, yeah, he doesn't even know he's been indoctrinated. I mean, that's the whole purpose of the state educational system. Remember that big battle they were having over Elian, the illegal alien that its father was in Cuba? The battle was over which government's going to get to educate him, because he got sent back to Cuba, and not surprisingly, he's all pro Castro and so forth. At least he says he is. So that's where it starts, okay? And you see all these businessmen, right? I mean, great big corporations, they repeat the same bromides. You see it on TV and stuff about the troops defend our freedoms, the troops defend our freedoms. And I think part of that is, of course, the same, emperor has, the new clothes and so forth. Part of it's the indoctrination. But part of it also is that big corporations know what would happen to them. If they bucked the government on this, if they took the line like, this is ridiculous, the troops are preserving the empire, they're not defending our freedoms, and you don't need an empire to be a free society. In fact, an empire is contrary to a free society. But you don't see businesses doing that. Why? Because they know the government can retaliate. All right, it's not like the government's going to put them in jail or anything, but they're going to do here's a classic example, what Putin is doing in Russia. Russia's, they're going after the dissidents, but they don't go after them for speaking their mind and criticizing the government. They go after them for tax violations or regulatory violations, and then they lock them up for 20 years. Well, that's what they do over here too. I mean, remember the telecom business, where President Bush went to the telecoms and he says, I want you to turn over all your information, and they said, on customers, and they said, Mr. President, that's illegal. Yes, that's illegal, but don't worry, I got your back, and this is national security, and I want you to do it, and I'm expecting you to do it. Well, they knew what would happen if they didn't comply with that. So they couch it all in terms of, well, we were patriots, give us immunity, please give us immunity, we were patriots, we were trying to preserve national security, we were responding to the call of our ruler. This is nonsense. They knew what would happen to them if they didn't. No, the government wouldn't put them into jail for refusing to do this illegal act, but they'd go after them for regulatory violations, income tax violations. The IRS would come clamping down on them. By the way, that's exactly what happened with Joe Nocchio. He was the president, CEO of Quest. He says, I'm not going to do this. It's illegal. It violates the confidentiality of my customers. They went after him. Not for that. For insider trading violations. Just the same thing what Putin did and is doing. So you have this entire corporate business community that are just conformists on this issue of foreign policy. You don't see any of them speaking out. They all say the troops defending our freedoms. Yes, the troops are defending our freedoms. Because they know what the government would do to them. And one of the biggest problems in all this is that people honestly have convinced themselves that this is all freedom. That the national security state, the military-industrial complex, the whole Cold War machine that, of course, never went out of business when the Cold War was over, the CIA, the vast intelligence operations, the NSA, this whole Cold War machinery, FBI, that people are convinced that there's freedom. And then on the domestic side, the economic side, you've got the welfare state and the planned economy. So what happened here is, okay, you had a system which was called a free enterprise system, all right, and a limited government republic. That's how it starts out. Okay, no social security, no income tax, no welfare, no foreign aid to dictatorships, no foreign aid at all. People kept everything they earned. Charity was entirely voluntary. You were responsible for yourself and your own family. You handled your own bills and your own charitable decisions, and that was the way the system started. Okay, it wasn't a perfectly free system. You did have slavery for a long time, and you had tariffs, and you had regulations here and there and so forth. But no Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, public schooling, government schooling, income taxation, no central bank, no Federal Reserve. They had sound money, no paper money. They had gold and silver coins. Well, then all of a sudden, what happens is the statists come in and they have an overlay on this thing. And the overlay is the welfare state that completely, suppresses, destroys, essentially, the enterprise system, the free enterprise system. Because now you've got an income tax. And it's confiscatory. They can take whatever amount they want. If they want 90%, they can take it. And so everybody's got to be nice to the rulers, because now the rulers have the power to destroy them, because that's the power to tax is the power to destroy. And then you've got this massive welfare state, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, power to take money from one person, give it to another person. You got the drug war, you can put people in jail for minor drug violations. So you got this huge paternalistic overlay, and then on top of that, in 47, you get this enormous national security state with an empire. It's not just national security in this country like the Egyptian system is. Ours goes abroad with an empire with 1,000 bases in 130 countries. That overlays on top of the welfare state, and people convince themselves this is freedom. I mean, this is what Johann Goethe was talking about, that none are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. And because you can't have a system that's contrary to what we all acknowledge, well, most of us acknowledge that it was a free system, that Americans lived under a free system, with the exceptions I enumerated. But here you have two overlays that destroy that. And so now you've got out-of-control spending, you've got out-of-control debt, you got paper money, you got a central bank that debases the currency decade after decade after decade. You got a massive welfare state that they can't afford. They've got empire they can't afford. They're spending $1 trillion more. In other words, their overlay is taking us down. And it's actually, there's your threat to freedom. Because notice that the government then uses, the anger and hatred it generates overseas to take away our freedoms here at home. The power to assassinate, the power to take us into custody and put us in the hands of the military and torture us with no trial, detain us indefinitely, even for the rest of our lives, kangaroo military tribunals. These are the dictatorial powers that are held by the Egyptian military dictatorship. And our regime now has those powers. They call them temporary powers because of 9/11, which happened, 11, 12 years ago? I mean, it's incredible. There's your loss of liberty, and you've got the welfare state that's destroying us economically. You've got the drug war that's destroying us with all the people in prison. So you've got this huge overlay that people perceive as freedom. I mean, that's the power of the indoctrination, to convince people that nothing happened. That, okay, you had these overlays, but it was all minor, and it's all still freedom. So you got all these happy little slaves running around, worrying that some terrorists are going to come over here and, I guess, take away their freedom even more. I mean, they've already lost their freedom. We've lost our freedom because of this double overlay. The welfare state, the planned economy, the stimulus plans, the bailouts, the out-of-control debt, all that overlay, and then on top of that, the warfare state, the military-industrial complex, and you don't see any of these politicians, except the libertarian ones, challenging it. And that's what we do. Before you get too despondent, depressed, and all this, oh my gosh, we were in such a bad shape. Think of how hopeless you would feel if there were no libertarians. I mean, we provide the hope. We're the light shining through the darkness because we provide the meaning of what freedom's all about. Okay, so then people can be drawn to that light, and then you never know what the outcome's going to be. And if they could change our system and put these overlays, then granted, people can remove the overlays. And that comes about through the power of ideas on liberty. And that's where we libertarians are all about. But what we've got to do is continue, don't get mired down in the reform business. That's what conservatives do. Conservatives, accept the welfare state. They accept the warfare state. They teach their children that they live in a free society. And they're all about reform. I mean, look at the Medicare and the Social Security and all the public schools. They're always talking about reform. It's the libertarians that are saying, no, all you're doing is reforming junk. You're reforming this junk of an overlay and another overlay. that the only way to achieve freedom is to lift the overlays, so that then you have a society where people are free to keep everything they earn. They decide what to do with it. No more Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all these systems that are taking us down. No more coercion in the area of charity. It's a system where we got to believe in ourselves, we got to believe in others, we got to believe in freedom, we got to believe that there's a higher order of things that doesn't intend for us to live like we're living under a regime that's assassinating people, killing people, murdering people, torturing people. That's not normal. And it's because of these overlays that it exists. We libertarians are the hope. We are the light that shines through the darkness here. And that's why we've got to continue shining that light. We've got to continue making it brighter and brighter. If we do that, we can achieve liberty by lifting these overlays and restoring a free and prosperous and peaceful society to our land and leading the world out of the status morass in which the world finds itself. Thank you very much. That's the show. See you next week.